Hello and welcome again to Brandmasters, a podcast that will bring insights and inspiration from the world's foremost thinkers, marketers, and brand builders. I'm Anand Sankaranarayanan, co-founder at TMA Global and your host for this podcast. This is the third and the final episode of our inaugural season. In the first episode, we spoke to Dane Scotty, the director of brand strategy at Google, and in the second episode, we had a conversation with the legendary Dr. Clotaire Rapaille. Today, we are talking to one of the top creative professionals in the world, Kevin Lynch. He's a former creative director at Oatly and currently the founder of the agency We Are Raw. Yes, that's the name of his agency. Kevin is a distinctive creative professional whose work at Oatly has pushed the brand to great heights. He has a fascination with psychology and he believes advertising is all about persuasion and craftsmanship. I'm honored to present this episode, which is full of his insights and approach to creative brand building. Let's dive in. Hello. Hi, Kevin. Good morning. Welcome to Brandmasters.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to be talking to you today, and it's an honor to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks. How about yourself?
Good. All good. Great. So let's dive straight into our discussion, right?
Sounds great. Cool.
Yes. So, Kevin, you have mentioned in the past that advertising has the most interesting elements, right? Touching on branding, persuasion, and craftsmanship, right? How does your fascination with psychology actually play a role in your approach to advertising?
Well, it's a good question. I think, you can't be a good communicator if you don't have a connection with your audience, have an understanding with your audience. I think I think probably the biggest mistake or opportunity, I guess, brands have is to be more audience-centric rather than brand-centric. And I think that's a tough thing to do. I mean, you're so embedded in your own kind of world that, you're kind of looking at the world through the lens of what you just invented, what you're launching, what your sales goals are, what have you. But I think I think ultimately the vast majority of work that we see out there is far more about the product than it is really about the audience. And if you I think even if embedded in your language, as advertising people, we target consumers. It's like, so we're basically saying you're of no value as a person. You're only value to us as if you're buying things. And I think that, again, I think there's a lot of sort of psychology that's embedded in our processes that probably makes it more difficult for us to make a real connection with people.
Yeah, I love that because the perspective changes everything the brand can do, right? From being brand-centric to audience-centric, you're keeping them in the focus on every single decision that they're going to take. That's going to change the game. I love that. Do you see a common thread among the best ad professionals who are deeply intrigued by this human psychology?
I definitely think so. I think I think most of the most talented people have that sort of curiosity about, what people are kind of going through and what have you. I forget what designer said, the best design is empathetic. And I think that extends over into the verbal part of it as well, that ultimately a good communication is really pulling you in as an audience. It's not just simply a reaching out. And again, I think it's just that's a really different mindset than most brands typically take into the beginning of those conversations.
Yes, certainly. So from understanding human psychology, I think the natural extension for creative professionals to do some outstanding work in advertising is still curiosity. right? Let's talk about. I want your perspective on the curiosity, creativity connection, right? Because in general, in advertising world, whether or not somebody understands or studies psychology formally, the entire profession revolves around understanding people, right? Neil French said one of his strengths lay in understanding people, right? Do you believe a deep curiosity is inherently important, to be successful in creative, that influences your storytelling approach itself completely?
Yeah, I very much think it does. I should probably admit that I was only a psychology major for a semester and I got kicked out. But yes, but I do think that curiosity that's so part of that feel. I think that's probably the most common trait you find in successful storytellers, successful marketers, whether you're client side, agency side, creative, accounts, media, whatever. So I do think curiosity is sort of embedded there. But again, I think we've set up these systems that get so far away from that curiosity and from that connection potentially with people. Like, I was wanted a brief to be real. Like, I wanted a brief to say, hey, it'll never say, hey, the person you're trying to reach, their mom's in the hospital and their daughter's not doing well in school, and it looks like the company they're working for is going through a merger, which is going to put their job at risk. And by the way, we need to tell them that there's 25% more blueberries in their yogurt. It's like if you really painted the picture of who you're talking to, where their heads are at, you'd go at that really different than the typical brief we would do, which is the typical brief we put out is like, we want our consumer to take the guesswork out of breakfast or whatever it might be. Like, it just again, we kind of live in this weird little world. Like, I was just watching a video this morning of a sort of behind the scenes of the David Beckham Henry thing for Lay's, where they pulled someone from the audience and had them sit with the two footballers to watch a match. It's a really lovely piece of work and what have you. But I was thinking about the tagline, which was no Lay's, no game, and you just kind of go, so you're telling me that this thing I'm so incredibly passionate about, like, this might be the center of my life, and you're telling me like that doesn't really count unless I have your product. You know what I mean? And I know it's like, I know that's not to be taken so literal and so serious.
I know, but there's no authenticity you're saying, right?
Totally. It's an arrogance that I think we bring into these conversations, and I think that probably keeps us from connecting with people as well as we can.
I agree with you. Maybe like it's a bit of a stretch that they've taken. Maybe the creative liberty that people say, right, in the domain, like, stretched into a large extent. Interesting. So in your creative journey, right, how has curiosity maybe acted as a catalyst, for you to get the most innovative and impactful campaign or ideas? How has curiosity helped?
I think it's like even more than just specific assignments and campaigns and stuff like that. I think that's been sort of at the center of like job decisions and roles that I've taken. I always say, like, I quit my jobs because of boredom, not because of anything else. Like, when that curiosity kind of goes down, yeah, like that's the time to leave. And I think that, and then the jobs that I choose next are always something that's like I'm curious about, something I haven't done before. Whether that's a role that you're going to play within an agency, whether it's a big or small agency, big network, small agency, whether you're starting your own place, whether it's client or agency side, whether it's a different country, like whatever. There's always something embedded in there that, like, you go, that really kind of speaks to that curiosity that I have. So
nice.
Yeah. I think it's played again, even beyond work itself, I think it's played a really
nice role. Very interesting. I'm just going to pivot a bit here from the creativity, curiosity connect, because you said curiosity is what even actually keeps you in a job, right? It keeps you in one particular place that excites you on what's next. Maybe once you've discovered what all it is possible to discover in a place or in a run, then maybe your curiosity level goes down. Then maybe I think you will start looking at where is the next place that you can be very curious about. Don't start unraveling one idea at a time. Is that how your brain works?
I think it does. Yeah,
Okay.
I really think it does. In fact, like I'll give you a funny sort of like little thing.
Yes.
Is so I don't use an alarm clock, and because I'm really wired by like 5-6 in the morning. I'm excited, like I really dig what I do, and I always know it's time to change jobs when I start sleeping in. Like it's just that sort of natural, like I'm just not, and again, I think curiosity is a huge part of that. But I think that. Yeah, I think that.
That is very interesting. That's really interesting. It's not just about work, but it's about your life, right? That carries around with curiosity. Nice.
For sure.
So, one other question that I had with curiosity as a topic before we move on to the next discussion was creativity often requires taking risk, right? Only if you take risk, you will push boundaries and you will challenge the status quo. You will try something which is not tried before, and then the unique outcome or remarkable achievements will come, right?
Yeah.
Do you think there is a connection between being inherently curious in your approach that automatically leads you to do some risk-taking measures and work in creativity? I mean, is there a direct impact or connection link? Could you elaborate on that, or your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally think there's a link there, and I think that sense of curiosity, like I think that that will typically it will typically have you asking questions that go beyond the brief, that kind of like have you wondering more about the people you're talking to, or the manufacturing of the thing that you're trying to get people to buy or whatever. Like I think most of these great stories you always hear of people sort of uncovering these insights are just out of curiosity. And again, sometimes that comes from a creative, sometimes from strategy, account, it doesn't really matter what your discipline is. I think there's always people who there's a great quote from some consultant I interviewed years ago who said, a good consultant answers questions, a great consultant questions answers.
Yeah.
And I think there it's like typically I think that more creative or that sort of more curious mind will always go, yeah, that's great, thanks for the information, what didn't you tell me?
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think the real challenge is not necessarily that for people to think to like be curious. I think the challenge is that curiosity is, from a business standpoint, I think curiosity is really inefficient. Curiosity means you're going to go down dead ends, then spend a lot of time doing that. It's curiosity is going to take you off strategy, and you're like, well, what if we did that? And so I think a lot of that sort of playfulness, when you're in a structure that's operating for efficiency, there's this real tension. So I think, yeah, totally. And so, I think if you're conscious about it as a curious person, if you're conscious about it as an organization that wants curiosity to thrive, I think you just need to recognize that friction and figure out ways to kind of either reduce it or eliminate it.
Correct. No, I completely agree with you. I love your point, because if you want to be efficient, I don't think you can apply that principle on the domain of creativity or curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Because creativity cannot be defined with time frames, right? I would need a earth-shattering campaign in the next 1 hour. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So there, the yardstick of measurement should change. It can't be the same yardstick that you apply to other operational processes that is going to be applied to a creative process. Then I think it's a wrong measurement tool that you're even evaluating. The process itself is not a right approach. And yeah, sure. Before you start seeking answers, seek questions. Answers are easy. Like seeking the right questions are difficult. That actually leads you to some goal spot somewhere. Some good ideas will come from, right?
Totally.
I agree with you. I love that. So now, it's pretty interesting to know about the curiosity part. Now let's dive into the Oatly part. Right.
Sure.
So, as you reflect on the entire journey and evolution of Oatly, okay, can you share some of the challenges you faced, during this journey of building Oatly as a brand? How did the entire organization got aligned behind this big idea of what Oatly went behind?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I'm the best person to answer about how it got aligned. We can, conduct. Okay. My dog wants to say hi.
Okay.
Nice.
Hello.
Do you mind? We're in kind of interviewing. Sorry. I think that one of the best things that Oatly kind of embedded in their process or in their thinking is, kind of recognizing what they're trying to do, and getting back to your friction comment, for them, it's like that organization exists to create change, and people don't naturally change. We're trying to change the food systems, we're trying to change the choices people make, in their sort of daily food choices and what have you, change is inherently tense, and so I think one of the neatest things about that brand is they've the first thing that Tony Peterson, who is the CEO that led kind of the turnaround in 2012, John Schoolcraft headed up creative right around that time as well, and the first thing those guys produced was this thing called the Book of Change, and it was sort of an internal document. It was meant to say, hey, this company has been modestly successful for 15 years, following a bunch of rules and acting more like a typical food processing company, and we want to change it over to a lifestyle company. We want to do it, asking people to create more change in their life. So instead of just going for the lactose intolerant and the vegans, like people who are naturally attracted to the product, we're going to, take a look at the climate footprint that this product does, and we're going to, use that as a bit of a rallying cry to gain even more sort of fans. And so I think that by doing that, they just sort of recognize that, hey, we're gonna kind of piss people off. We're gonna try and upend the dairy industry, which is pretty well embedded in cultures and in sort of funding and all those types of structures. And I think if you're willing to recognize the tension that you're creating, I think you're much better suited to have those hard conversations, to not be afraid of controversy and things like that. And so again, embedded in all those are some of the things that I think make the brand really unique. Okay. Sorry.
Nice.
Really wants to say hi.
Hello. Hi. Welcome to the podcast. Who needs you?
I'm sorry, but go on.
No problem.
I assure you I'm listening.
Yeah. You should go on. That's fine.
Thanks, buddy. That's okay. Go on. Sorry.
Okay. So, touching upon the change, you said like the book of change that got circulated internally, to say that for the past 15 years we've been like that. We're going to change everything, because change is something that is very difficult to bring into any organization. How was it even accepted, and how was it like everybody got into this concept that we will completely shift gears? It's not just like a incremental change, it's going to be a monumental shift in our approach, right? That's how Oatly was when they rebranded it, right? How did things work internally? I'm very curious about the mindset shift that happened.
Yeah. So again, I wasn't there at the time, so take this as the second-hand knowledge. At least, but I think that I mean, there were definitely a couple of folks who just weren't able to kind of make the shift, and they were happy with living with the brand as it existed in the first 15 or so years. But for others, the thing that, if you look at that sort of book of change, like it lays out a really a really cool picture, and one that says, hey, the work that you do for this company is going to have a much greater impact because of the route that we're doing, because of what we're bringing in to kind of get people more into the plant-based world. And if you're looking around at climate change, and you're looking around at just sort of this natural growth of plant-based choices, people are probably looking at that going, hey, yeah, the work that I'm doing is that much more valuable because of this change that they're bringing in. So I think there's probably a pretty attractive proposition, even if the company hadn't reached the heights that it has. I think just looking at the approach they were taking was pretty compelling.
Pretty compelling. Nice. Interesting. At your time, okay, at Oatly, you can answer from that perspective, right?
Yeah, sure.
Building a bold brand actually requires a fearless team. A fearless team which has a supportive culture in the organization that encourages you to fail. They shouldn't kind of discourage you or do a review of sorts, like last quarter you did so many other failures and stuff like that, right? If you want to truly build an innovative company, there needs to be a fearless team and a culture that completely supports, right? How the company's mindset sort of emboldened your team to take creative risks, and how did this whole department of mind control came about, and what did it do? I would like to hear your perspective on that and your insider view about that.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that there's in that organization, you have this incredible appreciation for creativity, and I think part of that is a great trust of the folks in marketing, and frankly creativity throughout the organization. I think that came largely that was established by the relationship that John and Tony had together. I think one of the neatest things that they did early on was, John said, yeah, we're firing the marketing department. And he said, instead we're going to create the Oatly Department of Mind Control. And you can look at the Oatly Department of Mind Control and go, there's a number of marketing things that you guys are doing. But I think it is more than a name. I think, sometimes names, put our, by naming things, we put ourselves in buckets and set expectations that we don't necessarily want to live under. The neat thing about the Oatly Department of Mind Control is I've seen a ton of org charts. I've never seen where the Department of Mind Control is supposed to be, and so by kind of, really kind of reframing the role creativity has and the role that team had within the organization, it allowed them to jump into product innovation discussions, distribution discussions, pricing discussions, and I think it allowed them to kind of let creativity sort of seep throughout an organization versus just versus just letting it be owned in this one little sort of department. So yeah, I really think that name reframed the role that they had, and then they did a bunch of really smart things as they everyone was involved in these different discussions. If good things hadn't come from those discussions, I don't know if we'd be sitting here talking about it. So, but yeah, they
exactly
shouldn't have that. Yeah, that's
exactly. I'm connecting this topic back to the curiosity that we discussed a few minutes back. Since you said the creativity as a domain got permeated into every department of the organization, be it product, pricing, distribution, sales, everything, right? So for the creative team or the new team who has no exposure to how that domain worked, do you think the curiosity drove and asked questions at every different perspective, which they would not have probably asked if they were within the sales team? Because you were giving an outsider perspective. Why this way and why not this way? Do you think that actually created a mindset shift, or we got to do it something different? No matter, irrespective of whether this is how it has been functioning for decades or even centuries in the other companies, we can see things differently. Is that somewhere helped?
Yeah, I absolutely think that's the case. I think I think there's sort of a water level on any company that you walk in. You go, okay, these kind of ideas might have a chance. These ideas, might not, and what have you. And so I do think there's a norm that whether companies realize it or not, is sort of well established, and most people will eventually kind of move towards that norm. And with Oatly, that norm is just really, really high. I always talk about how people love the voice of the Oatly brand. I always say that's not a marketing voice. That's genuinely a company voice. It's like, running into coworkers in the, in the middle of the hallway and going, we always do this, but why can't we do that? That sort of challenger mentality is really on a day-to-day basis. Like you can really feel that. And so, I think that's pretty massive. I think that, to me, one of the challenges of any organization that's growing as quickly as Oatly is kind of retaining that sense of culture. And so, one of the things I was working on before I left last summer was to create the Oatly Center for Unlearning. And it was basically a sort of an approach to onboarding where we could do a better job of defining like what is really special about the organization, and then making sure as people are coming in from the Unilevers of the world and the Mars of the world, what have you, they're coming in with really different mindsets. And so they say, hey, we're super glad you're here. We need this skill, we need that skill, we need that skill. But gosh, we think differently about these couple of things, and you should really rally around understanding why we do that, and really become an advocate for that, because it's important to us. So I think just again having that conscience as an organization to go, we've built this really cool thing, let's make sure that gets retained, and that gets sort of shared out, socialized with everyone else. I think is huge.
Nice. It's been, I think the entire culture has been institutionalized and protected. Like I said, if outsiders are coming in from other organizations, we don't want that culture to seep into what is only been set already. So I love that center for unlearning. And you got to unlearn few things to come and blend into the Oatly's culture and start seeing things differently. Yeah, that must have been the most difficult thing for many people. I could imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, it never took off. Like I said, I was just pulling it together before I left, and so I think there's probably still an opportunity to do better on that. But again, we're pulling people in because they have skills that the organization needed. So it wasn't a let's wipe your mind clean.
Right, exactly.
It was just defining some of the things we do different that have proven to be really valuable for the company.
Yes. So, great. So, Kevin, you stated in the past that Oatly had no formal brand guidelines, or they don't have any set tone of voice, right? Yet, in communication and creative outputs from the brand, there's been a remarkable consistency, right? What factors do you think would have contributed to this phenomenon? Because brands will set brand guidelines and like define tone of voice and creativity and visual representation of it. Even such brands tend to drift far away sometimes from what they originally intended to do, because in hindsight they may not be able to notice it, but like suddenly in 3 years down the line, if you probably look at what you've done in the past, you feel like you've really drifted far away from what the brand originally intended it to be, right? How, when without having a written formal guidelines, do you think we could achieve this in reality, in real life?
Well, so it is true that there was never any sort of written down guidelines or brand book or what have you, and yet I think it's one of the most well-defined brands out there. And I think part of that is because if you don't write them down, and if someone wants to do something, they kind of have to come back to the village elders and go, please teach me the ways, and I think just that process creates a really tight control. And so I think more than anything, it's, partly it's the talent of the people who, have kind of defined that, and sort of still keep it really well controlled. Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. I think once you do the brand book and you spread it out to your various regions and people start interpreting those in different different ways, when markets start to create their own stuff, that's where you typically see a global brand kind of stray from that sort of well defined sort of
correct
articulation with it.
Nice. Maybe there's is there a unsaid department of creative control, like mind control is actually controls the consistency in the brand?
I think there probably is a little bit of that, yeah.
Wow, well, so it's pretty interesting. And without guidelines having such remarkable consistency and the standards of creativity, right, that never gets dropped.
Yeah.
Whether it's like a small, like a postcard of sorts, or like a billboard of sorts, like the benchmark is set.
Yeah, it really is. It's such a joy of a brand to work on. I always called it, the easiest job I ever had, just because it's sort of like, it's sort of like you walk in there on day one and they just hand you a bunch of toys and say, go play. I mean, it's like they've done the hard part already. And so, that was a fun.
Nice.
For sure. Yeah.
Nice. So, Kevin, when I was dissecting some of the campaigns of what Oatly has done, it is evident to me that although it is a creative company, it's like creativity is given importance to the entire organization. Within every campaign that the brand has done, there seemed to be a strategic foresight, which was a key component in all of them. But one example, if you have to take, is the most infamous fuckoatly.com. Right, that's a brilliant example. Right, I interpreted that as, it's like, if you are creating a new category, right, and if the category needs to grow from being a very niche brand or a niche segment to making alternative milk as a mainstream category or segment, we got to include everybody in the market, in the society. You can't leave out more people, then the category will not grow. So I think it is a great idea to expand the universe, which includes even the skeptics and the critics of the brand, and that's a really bold move. And I found humor as a great tool that was used to potentially try to convert those skeptics and critics into your brand evangelists. Right? Can you give some insights on the thinking process behind such campaigns? Even take fuckoatly.com as a campaign example if you want to.
Yeah, for sure. And just to be clear, I did not work on that project in particular. Yeah. I'd love to, but yeah, there's enough talented people there to do a bunch of different projects. So, but I do think that's a really nice, really great example to use for what you're saying. To me, so Linda heads up our community management or community management team, and she would always say, when you're being hit online through comments, people are being critical, she would always say, like, look, you're probably not going to turn that person around, but the way you engage with them, the way you listen to them, the way you offer up, sort of facts of going, I totally get why you hate us. Here's why we did what we did, and we'll just have to live with that hate. The visibility of how you engage with them is going to be, is going to be seen by the 95% who aren't posting anything, and that's really the win. It's not turning this person around or what have you. The thing I love so much about the Fuck Oatly site is it's very non-apologetic. It's like, yes, these are the things that are angering you, and it's not. Yes, there's some trollness in the name and what have you, but I totally love just the fact that it's like, hey, this is why we're doing what we're doing, and it's like it's very factual. This is why we've taken money from these investors that we have. This is why we've chosen yes, this is not a perfect manufacturing process. This is the best one that we found available, and here's why. And I think that, to me, that site is terrific it's really not different than anything they've done since sort of that change book. It really was going, there's a sort of like just blatant honesty and blatant sort of just a sort of upfront kind of communication that it's
and
I think
they're layered it with humor as a tool to communicate what they want to communicate in a factual way. I think that resonated with people, is what I truly believe.
Yeah, for sure. So I always say that Tony, the CEO, said, we believe in laughter over lecture. And I've heard since then Tony never said that, so maybe I made it up, but it seems like a smart thing for a CEO to say, so I'm just going to say Tony.
Yeah. That was a good one. So, how did the groundwork usually happen before executing initiatives initiatives like that? Like, say, Oatly.com, or even the most infamous the spam newsletters that got launched from the brand, right? What will be the thinking behind it, and how did this whole consensus even arrive at let's launch it?
So I think the vast majority of Oatly projects start with someone going, "Hey, wouldn't it be funny if, or wouldn't it be cool if?" Like, it really, like, it's a very idea centric place. And so, we will always have a plan, and we'll always be totally willing to deviate from that plan. And I think it's that, it's that sort of built-in flexibility that allows us to pivot, allows us to be a bit, more reactionary to things that are going on. I keep saying us and what have you, them. But yeah, like I again, like I think just like embedded in those processes, you have creativity at the heart. You have a willingness to say what other people are just thinking, but aren't going to say out loud. And again, like I think if you are in this sort of disruptive mindset, then you see a lot more opportunities than a typical brand thinking today or things might. And so you look at like a fuck Oatly thing, it really came out of like, God, we're just we're getting shit on for this, shit on for that, and all these things are all over the place. We should make it easy. Like, if you want to hate us, like, let's give you one single source to do that. And you look at a decision like that, and you don't go like, yeah, that's going to make the brand a lot of money, but you look at it and you go, yeah, that's really going to forward the conversations we're trying to have and we're trying to promote, and so it does make sense. So, and I think that, I think being idea centric and being willing to kind of pivot on existing plans has been a key part.
That's a good thing. Yeah, I think that is the built-in flexibility that the organization allows you to do. If it helps you to be on the plan, and the moment you feel it's not working, just take a U-turn and do something else. Very interesting.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing those inside stories on how Oatly's approach was to brand building.
Sure.
Now, let's talk about creativity in today's marketing, right? So, with the marketing role, which is actually constantly evolving, how do you see the role of creativity shifting, especially in today's context of digitization, right? What do you think marketers should do to navigate this era to build a strong brand?
I don't think what marketers need to do has changed, frankly. I think that, like, everything that's kind of going into a marketer's thinking is kind of getting louder and guiding everyone towards a sort of middle of the road kind of mediocrity. And I think that as much as we as marketers are supposed to be the creative ones, I think we're pretty much like lemmings. We're really comfortable following each other, and so when you look at kind of the voices in marketing, like, everyone's listening to the same couple of podcasts, everyone's if Bass Ehrenberg sneezes, everyone says God bless you. It's like I do think there's an opportunity for diversity of thinking. I've worked with a number of brands over the last few months who just said, hey, we're just going to let the algorithm decide. It's like, So do you realize the algorithm is going to point your brand somewhere that they're not pointing all other brands, like
on the brands? Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think that there are so many rules that we just, we don't even consciously say, let's follow those. But it's like, we don't sit there and go, why are you on social media? You don't have to be on social media. Why, like, brands are now really happy to go, hey, we created 1,200 assets for this campaign. It's like, that's not, like, there's probably not 1,200 things that are interesting about the campaign you just did. So I think there's sometimes like the technology is enabling us to create these like massive amounts of assets, but it's like, it's not making it any more interesting, and so again, I think I don't think we take that step back and kind of question everything as often as we do, and when we do that, I think it really pays off. Like, agencies are really good at pointing out this sort of sea of sameness. I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of months talking about with various companies, talking about the source of sameness, like what's kind of causing that. And I think if you can get to the roots of that, if you can get to finding the laws that are guiding your category, it's much easier to break a law if you know the law, and so part of it is defining those, but then the other part of it is like, where the hell did this thinking come from? And why are we listening to that? Because again, everything you do every time you do something that all your other competitors are doing, it's that much harder to really define and create your own space.
Nice. I think the point that you made actually is making all of us think that there is a sea of sameness, but nobody knows the source to the sea of sameness. And it's like, even among the marketing community, everybody follows everybody, and that is creating a lot of homogeneity in thinking. Right? There's no diversity or a different perspective that people bring in. So then, how standing out is possible in today's market? And because there is a sea of sameness that everybody follows everyone and end up doing almost a similar experiment in your industry versus other industry, right? So according to you, how do you approach creating some memorable and impactful campaigns? Are there any specific principles that you probably adhere to, ensuring that the brand remains very distinct even in the crowded market, in today's world?
I don't know if there's a formula necessarily. I do think that the more monotone all brands are within any given category, the easier it is to kind of go, okay, well, let's not do this here. There's a lot of other things we can potentially do. So I do think part of it is just defining what everyone is doing, going, okay, which of these laws are we going to fuck with? And maybe it's all of them, a la Liquid Death. Maybe it's just one of them. But it's a really important one. It could be anything. But I don't think there's necessarily a formula. I do think part of it is recognizing why this category isn't getting the attention that you as a brand wish it did. And then from there, it's really, I think the other part of it is like, if you go at things from an audience standpoint versus a brand standpoint, already you're going to be ahead of 90% of the work out there, like guaranteed. Because like, we're all talking to ourselves as marketers, and so if you're able to break that out, like, I think one of Oatly's biggest advantages was just knowing that people are not looking for an oat drink ad, like an oat milk ad. It's like, just saying that is like, that's not what a brand is supposed to do, but it's fucking true.
Exactly.
So yeah, so I think being audience centric, you're going to be ahead of 90% already. Recognizing the rules and knowing which ones are we going to screw with, I think is another really nice way to kind of at least get you into the mindset where good service will.
Nice. That is, that requires a bit of risk-taking appetite, right? You got to have some risk appetite to do it. Otherwise, if you're going to play in the safe game like everybody else is playing, you'll end up looking similar to everyone else, right? So
yeah,
agree.
For sure. Agree. Yeah, and I think that's like a little bit of a it's a little bit like I always go, why did you go into marketing if you don't have that sort of risk-taking sort of ness too? I think I've come to really appreciate the fact that there is room for mediocrity in this world. Like Applebee's has 1,800 locations. Like this, like not everyone needs to be these sort of big disruptors or what have you. But if you do want to be a disruptor, there's a lot more fun there. There's a lot more sort of career stability there, because if you're following the rules, it's like those people are really easy to replace. So, it's your call.
Yes, certainly. Great. Now, let's decode Kevin's. Okay.
Yeah.
So, this is a question that's the most famous one in the CMO podcast that I have to ask this question to you, because it is not my question. So I have to put that disclaimer on side. So what is a brand that made an impact on you while you're growing up, which actually made you to take up the role that you're playing today? Do you remember any brand that actually made such impact on you during your early days?
I don't. And I don't think that brands have ever played like any big important role, and I think that I'm probably better suited for my job because of that.
Okay.
If you think about it, like we have what I think I saw in the U.S. household. There's like 300 different brands represented. It's like, I can't think one where like, this is a really important brand to me. Like they're just not. And I think the more we can kind of wrap our heads around that, there's products that we take joy from. I get that. But I just, again, I don't, there's not really been one that's had this big impact. I stumbled into advertising because I like the business part of it, the psychology part of it, and then the writing and creative part of it. Like it just happens to be for brands.
Nice, because that was the next question that I was about to ask you. Like, how did you end up becoming a creative in advertising? What actually pushed you? What literally pushed you into this domain? Or you planned it, or it just like happened to happen?
Yeah, no, it was totally like just failing out of other majors in college, in university. Yeah, I started in the business school in marketing, got kicked out of there, went to psychology, got kicked out of there, went to journalism. And as part of journalism, I had to take an advertising course. And as I'm taking it, I'm like, well, God, this kind of gets to the three different things that I'm interested in. I liked the business, sort of marketing part of it. I loved the audience and the connection thing, and then journalism really, as you mentioned earlier, that kind of gets that craftsmanship. So, it's a bunch of fun. But I always feel like I feel like I have a bigger responsibility to great ideas than I do to brands or clients or anything else. Like it's like I just want to get good ideas out in the world, ideas that reframe how people look at the world around them in a positive way. And if it's for brands, terrific.
Very nice. I think from your approach, I consider it as idea-centric person. Like you said, don't do brand-centric person, do audience-centric approach that you're talking about. But for creative, I think your approach needs to be idea-centric. Then that's what is more important than the business or the brand. Right? If the good idea survives, I think that's going to bring impact to the brand automatically.
It absolutely will. Yeah, for sure. You're right. They're not disconnected. It's just sort of like, what do you lead with?
Exactly.
I think that's absolutely true. At Oatly, it was sort of like, if all we do is get people to remember the name and like us, and they can't necessarily tell us what's different about oat milk or plant-based milk, like, you know what, the trust me, get people to remember you and like you, and your job is 95% done.
Correct. Exactly. Nice. That's pretty interesting. Where do you get your inspiration from? Like, do you read books or podcasts, or you meet with people, or you keep observing people quietly to get some inspiration?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of an all of the above. I'm more of an article person than a book person.
Okay.
On podcasts I go in and out of. I'm in a pretty heavy listening mode now. I feel like I've curated a decent social media, some decent social media feeds, which does a nice job of getting into work that from people you've never heard of, or places that, brands you've never heard of, or what have you. So that's pretty good. I think that, to me, I've lived out of the US for 12 years now. I was in China for about 8-9 years, and then here in Sweden now. And one of the things that I really genuinely miss out on is eavesdropping. Sounds stinky, but it's sort of like being in a country where you don't speak the language. You're just missing out on a shitload of stuff. It's really helpful to hear how people express themselves, what they care about, how passionate they care about it. And if you take, so I love doing the observation thing. I do think there's a ton to be said just from walking around and observing. Nice. From a language standpoint, I always feel like I'm at a real disadvantage, or at least I've been for the last 15 or so years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, since you said you worked in the US, China, and Sweden, right? In all these markets, what do you think there is some common thing that goes across when it comes to marketing and creativity and advertising? And you think there's something good or unique that you can probably point out that the rest of the world can probably have? Do you have any observations from your career?
Oh, and it's a really good question. I don't know. There's such radically different places that it's, just thinking of it from a common thread standpoint, outside of some of the stuff that we talked about of just being a brand that cares more about your audience than you do about yourself. Like, that's been true in all those places, and you do that in very different ways, based on those markets and products and categories and all that type stuff. But God, what's common among them? I think I'd have to get back to you on that. I really nothing. Yeah, nothing comes to mind. I think the most radical. Yeah, for U.S. is the U.S. But you go China, the way my wife and I describe our China experience versus, and we were in Shanghai mostly. There versus Malmö, Sweden. And in Shanghai, you'd wake up in the morning and go, I have no friggin' idea what's going to happen today. And there's a ton of excitement that comes from that unknown. And you here in Sweden, it's like you wake up, you're like, I know exactly how today's going to go, but it's going to be a pretty cool day. So, it's a bit of a, I think each of the places has not, great joy, but I don't know if there's too much shared connection there. Yeah.
Okay. So Kellen, of all the creative projects you've been involved in, is there one that holds a special place in your heart? And if so, what made it memorable, and what lessons you learned from that experience? If you can just narrate that.
I think the one that comes to mind first is a project we did with Partnership for a Drug-Free America way back when huffing or sniffing was becoming really popular, and it's an incredibly dangerous sort of high that kids go for, where they'll take common household products and sniff them to kind of use the chemicals to get high. And I went to Washington, D.C. to when the campaign was unveiled. And I had a mom come up to me, and she said, "Oh, did you write these ads?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "You don't have a child?" I said, "No, I don't." She said, "I could tell." She goes, "If you had a child, you would never be able to write like that." And the ads were really powerful. They were just about processing the death of a child. And I think just by being a little bit detached, by not being a parent, it allowed me to kind of create a communication that, just resonated so strongly with someone who's lost a child due to that activity, and ideally connect with other parents to keep an eye out for their kids potentially doing this as well. The other one that came to mind was Shanghai American School, and just all the work that I did there. And I think the thing that was most rewarding there was really helping people understand that they regardless of how long they're at the school, they're part of this bigger story. They're part of something, sort of more significant than their couple of years in Shanghai or what have you. And those two projects seem really different, but I think the thread that kind of connects them is really impact, wanting to make sure that, yes, you do some wonderful creative work, but that it really resonates, that it moves people, it helps them reframe what they're going through or reframe sort of the world around them. So I think that's probably, those are probably the two things that come to mind first.
Okay. So creative blocks are common in your industry, right? How do you personally deal with moments of creative stagnation, and are there specific activities you turn to for reigniting your inspiration? What would you do?
Yeah, it's a good question. Personally, I always find it's really helpful to kind of do two things. One, if you look at the definition of creativity, it's the combination of two unlike things. I think Ray Rubicam said that early on in the Young and Rubicam days. Steve Jobs said it. A bunch of other people have kind of observed that. And what I found really helpful is to take the rules or the laws of other categories and apply them to the one that you're working on. So look at, cars or housing or religion or, crack dealers. I mean, it could be anything, but kind of look at what are the infrastrucures of these different categories? What are the kind of the rituals that people go through? What are the little moments that those categories create? And then, wonder, just try and apply those to whatever you're working on. I think sometimes that sort of cross-pollination can be really helpful. That's probably the first thing. And the second thing would just be to answer the question, what's the worst thing this brand could possibly do? I think by going down that exercise, you kind of get into the truths of the product and the truths of the brand and the category and the things that people don't necessarily want to talk about in sort of a traditional advertising approach. But if that's what's kind of resonates with people, if that's what people have in their heads, sometimes starting there is a really nice, powerful way to be. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you genuinely do come up with the worst possible thing that a brand could do, and you don't do that. But I think those two things in particular are really helpful to kind of free you up and figure out how you want to tackle something in a new way.
Okay, so creativity also often requires a specific mindset, right? How do you cultivate a creative mindset? And are there any rituals or habits that help you maintain this mindset consistently? Could you share that to our viewers?
Specific mindset? Good question. I think it probably comes back to your points earlier on about curiosity. I think I kind of had this lifelong philosophy of never go to bed without a new story to tell. And by that, I mean, just sort of on a daily basis, kind of look for inspiration, look for whether it's a conversation with a stranger, taking a new way home, reading an article, watching a video about something that you didn't know about. I think if you kind of, look at this sort of opportunity for each day to be a bit of an opportunity to add to the well of references and of knowledge that you can dip into when you're thinking creatively, it's a really nice kind of mindset. And then the longer term version of that, the professional version of that, is I've always taken this mindset of sort of every year you need new stories to tell in your career. And I think that too, just that constant spurring on of a goal that's pretty attainable, but might make you stretch, is I think a really nice place to be for the career one. I always kind of look at it as if you're in a job where you're not necessarily doing your best work, or you're not going to, have a story to tell at the end of the year with your regular job, well, then, go off and find a new project, or do a passion project, do whatever it's going to take to make sure that the year does end with you growing in some way, being able to tell a new story in some way. And sometimes that's work. Sometimes that's managerial skills that you've developed, sort of team goals or what have you. It could be a lot of different things, but I think, again, just sort of having that incremental mindset where you're constantly sort of adding to the well that you can dip into is has been really a success. It's been more successful than pronouncing the word successful for me.
All right. So we have come to the end of our podcast. So Kevin, it's an absolute pleasure talking to you. And thank you very much for sharing your insights and wisdom on Brandmasters. I wish you all the best.
No problem. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure, and thank you for letting me duck out to get a haircut and change my shirt. Take care.